You're watching Learn How to Stop Overeating by Dr. Lissa Gall on Resonance Wellness TV, part of our Whole Life Medicine Alleviate series. Keep in the loop about future webinars and events on whole-life-medicine.com. Hello and welcome to Learn How to Stop Overeating. My name is Dr. Lissa Gall, and I'll be your guide this evening about the craving cycle. And as usual, this presentation is given in the context of the whole life medicine model, which is the model that I use at Resonance Wellness when I'm evaluating your healthcare situation. And today we're going to explore various components of both alleviate and align that can contribute to overeating. Overeating is definitely a big problem for many people, or should I say, the tendency to overeat and beat yourself up is a big problem. There are many factors coming into play when people are eating too much. I think we have a lot of room for improvement in how we approach eating in general. We've talked about this so many times before, and today I think you're going to actually get a sense of how many contributors there are to overeating behaviors. Some of them might surprise you. So let's take a look first at why we overeat. And if I had a magic pill for overeating, what would happen. In Canada, there is a really significant disease burden associated with overeating, some of which is related to obesity directly, but much of which is related to many other health conditions, from gastrointestinal issues to inflammation-based joint syndromes. I mean, obviously, we all need to eat, but isn't it interesting how overeating is so clearly an issue that pretty much all people recognize it as an issue? I don't think I've ever met somebody in my life that hasn't thought that at some point or the other that they have been an overeater. And it's affected by so many things. You can see the ones that I've listed here that we're going to talk about today. And I'm kind of hoping as we go along, you'll be able to see areas where you could improve your dietary habits that you haven't thought of before, or be reminded to take actions on ones that you already know about, but perhaps, in the last couple of years have been creatively ignoring. So we're going to do an overview of how genetics plays a role in overeating, which medications can lead you to overeat, even if you're using them temporarily, how hydration plays a role, how stress affects eating behaviors, and how habits on all levels are often influencing how you eat. And we're also going to take a look at food literacy. So even though eating can develop from a lot of different causes, the steps to shifting it are relatively consistent. If you can really identify and recognize an issue and then make yourself available to try a different strategy and be willing to make those changes consistently, that's usually where you're going to get the best behavior change. Because a lot of things is behavior change in eating. Not everything, but lots of things. So we're going to take a look at these areas now and talk about what kind of strategies might have an impact. So I want to start with the first one, which is genetics. And genes do play a role in overeating behaviors. And there are a number of genes involved, but their impact is not black and white. And you might have heard me talking about genetics before. We talked about it in the Start Here, Start Now course, which was probably now about 3 years ago. And I think there's portions of those lectures that are still available. If you had that course, they're still available to you. And we did also talk about genetics on another hour-long lecture for Alleviate probably a year ago. And so most people don't really understand what genes are. There's a kind of vague sense, you inherit these things called genes and they are responsible for things, but really they're only responsible for two major things. One is, how do you look as a body? Like, what is your body shape? What is your face like? Do you look like your parents? Those are one big role of genes. And then the second role of genes is in the transformations that you do in your biochemistry. So that includes everything from producing energy to regulating neurotransmitters. There's basically the biochemistry and the structure. Now, a specific gene codes for a specific protein, but we also know that some specific genes are actually reliant on other genes in the same cell, and they can even have different effects in different ethnicities. So, for example, there is a gene that is known as FTO, that's otherwise known as the obesity gene. And that gene name is oversimplified because, as I said, there's a number of genes involved, but nevertheless, it's a gene that has been studied in the development of obesity. And what it really is, what the FTO gene is a satiety gene. And satiety is the feeling of being full after you've eaten. So, can your body communicate with your mind that you're full? If you carry one of the AA genotype of the FTO gene, you have an increased risk of obesity because you don't feel full quickly. It increases overeating. So a person with this genotype would need more bulk, such as eating more vegetables, to feel full. And a person with that genotype won't do well on a high fat diet. They just don't feel full, so they overeat. Now, this is for a white Caucasian. So if you're a Black or African ethnicity, they don't have the same response to the FTO gene. So, and they probably have other genes that play roles. So it's quite tricky. Another gene is the MC4R gene. That's a regulator gene. It regulates hunger and appetite as it's expressed in the brain, in the hypothalamus of the brain. And so this gene has actually been really intensively studied in the context of childhood obesity. So this gene's related to the control of cravings. If you have the TT genotype, that's the optimal profile. You have kind of normal hunger and snacking cues. But if you don't, you'll have to be very conscious of overeating. There are also genes that have an impact on your blood sugar regulation, which can actually affect your eating behavior. So there's one called SLC308. That's a gene that has an impact on the transport of zinc. Now, zinc is an essential nutrient. Everybody in this group probably knows that, and it's a cofactor to enzymes. And in particular, it's a cofactor to enzymes that affect insulin regulation. So if you have the genotype where zinc transport is low, using more zinc will help regulate blood sugar, and it'll make you a much better, say, intermittent faster. So if you don't have great zinc transport, fasting will be very difficult for you. And you'll be one of those people who might need to be eating all the time or eating 3 meals. Let's not say all the time, but more regular meals because you actually can't pull in certain nutrients very easily. So I hope you get the idea. I mean, obviously in this lecture, we're not going to discuss all the genes that could be involved, but genetic analysis can sometimes give you information about how to work with your gene profile to implement strategies that are likely to work for you based on individual genetic polymorphisms, like even just this handful. And there's more. There's quite a few more genes that have a mix on food. I think we'll talk about that more in fall. Now, there are a number of medications that increase the likelihood of gaining weight, and sometimes we forget about these things because we're not used to thinking about them like that, or it's not a guarantee that somebody maybe always has this impact on their appetite or their body. But broadly, there's a number of different categories of drugs that create issues. So in the antidepressant categories, all of the different types of antidepressants. So tricyclics like amitriptyline, otherwise known as Elavil, that's often used in pain conditions like fibromyalgia. Those can easily increase weight. SSRIs like escitalopram, so that's Lexapro, or paroxetine, which is Paxil, or sertraline, which is Zoloft. They can cause weight gain by affecting your appetite directly. Also, when they alleviate symptoms of mood disorders, they also can affect directly eating or exercise habits. The monoamine oxidase inhibitors, they all work by blocking a brain enzyme that breaks down serotonin and dopamine. And so that actually stimulates appetite. And in this class of drugs, phenelzine, which is known as, I think the brand name is Nardil, causes the most weight gain. Of all those antipsychotic drugs, there's antipsychotics are used to treat things like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Zyprexa is probably associated with the highest potential to gain weight compared to the other antipsychotics in this category. And basically, these types of drugs impair glucose function. They increase cholesterol, they increase triglycerides, and so these patients are more at risk for developing metabolic syndrome, which at the end of the day can also affect mood. So it's kind of a catch-22 because these are commonly used drugs in institutionalized patients, and that kind of creates problems in a circle. So if you have a family member who's in this situation, you have to be aware that that is a potential over the long haul, the development of prediabetes. Now, corticosteroids also have a lot of side effects, one of which is directly increased appetite, but also fluid retention and altered metabolism. You should really take corticosteroids with food, and if you're going to take them long term, you will have to reduce food intake. There would be no way around that. So if you are on long term steroid treatment for some reason, you have to take that into consideration. There are also antihistamines that can create higher body weight. They've been shown to increase waist circumference compared with those people who don't use antihistamines. Things like Allegra or Zyrtec or Clarinex, those are the drugs that do it. There has been past research which was published in the journal Obesity, and they found that there's this association with the H1 receptor because histamine in the body actually turns off hunger signals. And so this is going to interfere with fullness signals if you're taking these drugs. Drugs that treat seizures, including gabapentin, which is one of the only nerve pain drugs that's really available. Lots of people use gabapentin, or pregbalin, like known as Lyrica. They all increase your appetite. And so basically, excess calories from greater food consumption lead to the higher weight gain. Beta blockers are drugs commonly used to treat hypertension, and some are more likely to cause weight gain, like the atenolols or metoprolols. That's a low pressor. And they can also make you tired. They slow down your heart rate and they decrease your exercise tolerance. And so when you get that fatigued and uncomfortable during activity, you're more likely to stay sedentary. And so that prompts the weight gain as well. There was a study that was actually published that showed that that drug actually decreases metabolism as well, so the direct production of energy. Ironically, insulin and the sulfonylurea drugs can exacerbate overeating. So if you're overeating like high sugar foods, like candy and dessert, and you're on insulin, you'll gain weight, basically. And the sulfonylureas are like the glycoside and the galbanclamide, that's glinase. Those are drugs that stimulate the pancreas to release insulin. And in the end, they cause weight gain in a similar way as injectable insulin. So metformin, though, is better. It tends to promote a little bit more weight loss, or it's weight neutral, meaning it doesn't create any big changes in blood sugar or appetite. So it's interesting because these are some pretty common classifications of drugs, and you'd be hard pressed to not have experienced some of these drugs yourself or know people personally that are taking them, and they can definitely create a problem. Now, the same part of your brain that's responsible for communicating when you're hungry and when you are thirsty is literally the same area of your brain. So that explains how easily we can confuse those two sensations. So whenever you begin to feel hungry, if you're trying to reduce your eating, try to just drink a glass of water and wait 15 minutes. You'd actually be surprised how often it's that rather than the other. Now, if you have a really good water habit, as I'm hoping many of you do, because you and I know I'm the water Nazi. Um, Hopefully this won't be have as big of a reaction to you. But if you aren't the best water drinker and you do have a tendency to overeat, this is a very simple problem. So even if you are hungry and not misinterpreting it for thirst, it's really beneficial to implement this practice. So drink a glass of water before a meal, 15 minutes before a meal. Send that signal of feeling full to the brain before you even start to eat. That will actually help. In our climate, dehydration is quite likely. And so it's really undermining so many cellular processes. And as you well know, I screen you all for hydration issues having an impact on your health every time I put you on the table. If you didn't know that, I do that every time. And it's often I catch it. And also, every time we do metabolic typing, I'll actually give you a number for your hydration. So remember that water intake should be a third of your body weight in pounds in ounces of water. That means if you run 150 pounds, it's 50 ounces. 120 is 40. 180 is 60. So it's approximately a third. Um, in ounces, a liter is 32 ounces. So you can kind of do the math. So you also have to ensure there's adequate electrolytes to move that water around. So don't forget the sea salt trick. So that water handout is on the essential handouts page on whole life medicine if you forget about that. Summer's coming, so I don't want you to forget. Now, stress, as I'm sure most of you know, has an impact on your eating behaviors. There was a good study in 2006 in the Journal of Physiology and Behavior that did two experiments. And experiment one demonstrated experimentally that stress causes changes in food choice away from healthy foods to less healthy, high fat foods. And in fact, the study used grapes versus M&Ms. So they just measured which kind of choices did people make based on their overall stress evaluation. In experiment two, they did a survey study that showed that more females than males report increasing food consumption when you're stressed. So a much larger percentage of those who report increase in their food consumption when stressed, about 71%, are actually restrained eaters, meaning that they're dieters, than are people who undereat who don't change the amount they eat when stressed, which is the lower number, 35% or so. So the foods that they reported overeating when stressed are foods they normally avoid for weight loss or health reasons. So, highly caloric, high fat snack foods, as an example. And they often reported eating those foods to feel better. But studies show that stress not only increases consumption in those certain individuals, but also shifts their food choice from the um, healthier food to the non-healthier food. Other studies recently have correlated COVID-19 stress with increased eating. I think we can all corroborate that a little bit. And in addition, stress tends to interfere with sleeping. And this is another problem because a healthy sleep schedule is crucial for many of our body's natural processes. After all, the sleep cycle is the time for your body to make that necessary switch for that fight or flight sympathetic nervous system activation to rest and digest, which is your parasympathetic nervous system. And inadequate sleep relates to an increase in hunger signals. There was a study published in the journal Sleep that showed that those who only slept 4.5 hours a night for 4 nights in a row ate 300 more calories in snacks in one sitting versus those who've gotten over 8 hours a night. So this is been shown in further studies that are showing that a lack of sleep causes a rise in a chemical that has been proven to cause people to overeat, specifically, again, with foods that are high in sugar, salt, and fat. So it's important to note the quality of your sleep is also an emphasis here. I mean, just because you've been in bed for 8.5 hours doesn't mean you slept soundly and woke up rested. And, we always have ways of helping people sleep a bit better. Sometimes people's sleep is actually disturbed by stressful thoughts, and we can use all sorts of things to just support your sleep, not knock you out because that's not necessarily any better, but to actually just improve your actual sleep. So if you have problems with this and you have problems with appetite, this might be one of the reasons. Now, I also wanted to talk to you today about food literacy, and this is something that most people may never have heard of. But food literacy is having knowledge about food in a way that translates into making good choices, not just feeding you, but feeding your family as well. And here you can see there's a great graphic about different areas of food literacy, and ideally being a little, at least a little bit literate in all these areas would inform your choices. So I'm just going to give you kind of a little ballpark. So if you start at the top of this wheel, food knowledge is the awareness of the type or varieties of foods that you can get. There's a lot of people in the world who don't see certain categories of foods get on their plate. So knowing what kinds of categories of foods there are, understanding where your food comes from, including where your food is produced or processed, how you procure food, ingredient science, so knowing what's in a food product and ability to make informed food choices based on those locally available options is basically what food knowledge is. Now, years ago, I did the field trip farm tours. I don't know how many of you remember that. And I took back actually, and we interviewed local farmers about what they produce and how they were producing it. We did videos of it and some blogging. And it's amazing to me how many people don't actually know where their food comes from. The average grocery shopping that you take home has traveled probably 1,600 kilometers to get to your store, and that has a huge effect on the quality of your food. But we rarely think about it. Most foods are shipped unripe, to prevent them from spoiling in transit because they are coming so far, and that affects what comes in the final product. So food is highly tied into transport systems, areas that can grow particular foods or make a food for cheaper than in Canada. That's often why we're importing things. Of course, those with less economic power often prioritize cheap food instead of healthy food. So, nutrition knowledge, on the other hand, is awareness of nutrients and their relevance to health. So, you know, also your ability to kind of get reliable information about food and understanding how foods fit into a balanced diet. Food and nutrition language are basically, just knowing what the commonly used words or terms that distinguish foods by their characteristics, figuring out how easy they are to prepare, um, things that are considered to nutritional characteristic foods like high fiber or low sodium. Really understanding what does that mean and what does it not mean. We've already gone through some interesting times where low fat has been used as a selling feature. That doesn't necessarily mean healthier, that just often means higher sugar. Now, food skills and food techniques are really important as well. So, food skills are relating to food purchasing, preparation, handling, storage. So, basic kitchen skills, basic competence in different methods of food preparation, like how do you bake something versus fry it or whatever. Some people never ever seem to learn those things or they don't increase their range. So, ability to read recipes, capacities to make sure you're doing food preparation safely. Those things are very important and they have an impact often on what we take in. The more that you understand, the more likely you are to make good decisions. There's also, like a food attitude, your ability to be open to taste new tastes, and try other healthier food products. It's really not an inherent characteristic. Like human beings don't come with that skill. They kind of come up with the opposite. They want to be sure of what they're eating. So of course, you've probably seen this. Um, in like just in having like McDonald's, like people don't like they like to go to a foreign place and eat the same food. That's the whole reason why that whole franchise has been so successful is people want to eat a Big Mac, across the country like they want to eat a Big Mac here. So that just gives you a sense. I mean, I'm sure most of you don't eat Big Macs, I'm hoping. But at the end of the day, it's an acquired skill to like increase your range. And the skill in an adult taught to the children of a family is of huge importance that really promotes a child's lifelong positive food attitude over the long haul. Now, in terms of food skills across the lifespan, you know, you have to be able to modify your diet depending on where you are in life. Is it a growing child? Are you a nursing mother? Are you pregnant? Are you introducing solid foods to infants? Are you feeding somebody with a chronic health condition or feeding people with disabilities? Is an incredible challenge. If you've had a disabled child in your family or a disabled adult relative, you'll know that there are incredible challenges in food variety and palatability, especially where there's difficulty in even taking the food in. So all of these things have an impact on, at the end of the day, our food choices and how balanced they actually are. And many of them are so not conscious, and we don't do a great job sometimes of developing those skills over time. Now, I would argue, like I said, that what's found on a person's plate has more to do with habit than almost any other factor. And, like I said, the example of McDonald's. I had one girl once 20 years ago. I remember this teenager, and I had asked her what she was eating, and she basically said, "Well, I eat McDonald's." And I'm like, "Well, how often do you eat it?" She's, "Well, like twice a day." And I was like, "Twice a day?" She was like, "Well, yeah." She's like, "What do you eat?" And it was like in her world, that was just normal. It was across the street from the high school, and that's why she ate it. Now, those kind of conveniences, though, are really important. I mean, how many people are busy and want to go through a drive-through? Um, I've had the experience. I mean, this is years ago. We went to Florida, and this is a long story, but we did end up at a McDonald's for a strange reason. But I remember standing there, looking at the menu, and my son was looking at the menu, and he didn't really want to be there either. But it was a kind of a family issue. And so we're both staring at the menu, and it was fascinating because the people who were behind the counter were absolutely gobsmacked that we didn't know what we wanted and that we were actually reading the menu. Apparently, people don't read the menu there. I won't tell you how that ended, but we expect certain things when we eat. The way a restaurant meal looks is an example, the way our family designed meals looked on the plate and what was made and how it tasted, what the meaning of that thing was. Family habits like finish your plate, finish what you take. People who don't sit around and relax. I had a boyfriend in university where his family had invited me up to visit with them, and we're all sitting around the dinner table. It was so awkward. And I thought, this is really weird. I mean, here we are eating this meal. It's a fine meal. We're sitting here at this table. But I found out afterwards that they never sit at the table to eat. They would literally stand in the kitchen balancing their plates, walking around and eating their meal. They ate in the same room, but it was completely ambulatory. So we all have these kind of interesting habits and our own particular ways of doing things. And this is one of the things that starts to get us, and we have to consciously cultivate away from those habits. Think about too the way that foods looked in our countries of origin. We're all bringing our experiences into Canada. Sometimes people are importing a style of eating that's related to a completely different lifestyle, a completely different climate. In this country, you can walk into a big grocery store and find a myriad of ethnic foods because we're all from someplace else. And you can even find like big ethnic food stores. When I lived in the US, this was super different. People there was totally encouraged to look the same, at least in public. So if you weren't looking for ethnic foods, it really took a lot of hunting to find them. But here, again, we can bring all of these elements in, and they're wonderful elements, and we should bring them forward and enjoy them. But they're often from places where, like I said, there's such differences in lifestyle that we can't actually eat them the way that we would have eaten them where we were originally. We're also super highly influenced by industry messaging. I mean, who doesn't know the campaign Got Milk, as an example? Food lobbies are super powerful. They are driven to influence consumer choices in the market. They are not based on health. They are they might use research like on the food stuff to drive sales, and that's been a super successful approach, especially in markets where the consumer doesn't really have a lot of knowledge about foods. But the food industry has an interest in producing cheap foods that taste good. So there's this huge growth and overuse of things like MSG and sweeteners. And um, in our trusting natures, we think whatever's in the box is safe. But that isn't always the case. And we have to learn how to think for ourselves and to not let somebody else tell you what it is that's good for you. You know, in addition, I think to what we spoke about in food literacy, I have often observed that people don't actually make the time or have the organization to organize for meals or food exploration at home, like doing it intentionally, cultivating something new at home. And like I said, new habits take time. You have to be willing to fail sometimes if something doesn't work out. And there are also habits while we're actually eating that we can work on. So let's just take a look at a couple of those right now. Like one example that we have is we can learn to eat mindfully. And I think probably most people have heard about that. So, mindfulness is this concept that's derived from Buddhist philosophy. It's a form of kind of meditation focused on self reflection. And specifically, the goal is to gain a better understanding of one's emotions and physical sensations and how to effectively manage them. So, mindfulness brings awareness and acceptance to whatever you're doing in the present. So, research has actually shown strong connections between a mindfulness meditation practice and healthy outcomes. It re- it reduces stress, it reduces compulsive behavior, and it decreases emotional reactivity. There's an improvement in relaxation and immune response and empathy. It's highly researched. And if you bring that approach to eating, which is the process of bringing your full attention to your experience and your cravings in that moment and the physical cues and the emotional responses while you eat, you can actually shift your relationship to food quite a bit. So, we're going to go over some of these concepts, things that you can actually do um, and over and above the things we've already talked about, that's more mindful aspects of eating. So, first of all, you can slow down. And there's a lot of benefits to eating more slowly. It's better digestion. You will probably be better hydrated from doing that, easier weight management, definitely more appreciation and enjoyment. There's very few things we take the time to do slowly intentionally. But if we can slow down our eating habits, it just like gives us more than a couple of extra minutes. It's also going to slow down all that intake and give your body a little bit of time, like I was saying before. If you have this tendency or this genetic tendency to not feel full very quickly, it will really help you to decrease how much you're eating. Now, you can actually put your fork down. I'm going to say this actually again in a second, but like you could just chew and set your fork down every once in a while and do it on purpose. And some of us just eat like we're on fire. I mean, and then you have someplace to go, clearly. But eating slowly actually works quite well. Now, I'm sure you've all gotten this messaging before, are you going to finish that? I certainly used to get that messaging. I remember being in medical school, and we were studying around the lunch table, and I'd ordered a salad of some type, but this salad came out and it was literally the size of my head. Like it was huge. And it had a whole bunch of stuff on it. I think it was probably like a chef salad or whatever. I remember sitting there and I was studying like where we're talking about this, whatever we were studying, and I remember I'm forcing myself to eat off this plate. And it was because I realized well, three-quarters of the way through it as I realized I was getting so full, and yet I was still forcing myself to eat. I had messaging growing up that if you put something on your plate, you'd better finish it because there were starving children on the planet, right? So those family things die hard. And actually, it was in that moment, and I was, gosh, like almost, I would have been late 20s by then, where I realized, oh my God, I don't have to finish what's on my plate. It's like not a do or die thing. I'm not killing anybody in the rest of the world by not finishing this. And I can take it home if I really want to. So it's a habit to just kind of stop, right? I mean, again, it takes approximately 20 minutes from the start of eating for your brain to really communicate those feelings. So that could be 20 minutes after you already were full. And there was definitely, I was hitting the top end like when I was eating that salad. So you're not even beginning to sense being full until after your meal. So if you, there was some research done at the University of Rhode Island and examined the speed of various eaters, and the study concluded that slow eaters consume about 2 ounces of food per minute, medium speed eaters 2.5 ounces of food per minute, and fast eaters about 3.1 ounces per minute. So that's a huge difference cumulatively. If you are somebody who eats fast, you might eat 22 more ounces of food in an average mealtime compared to those who eat slowly. And that is going to add up. Pardon. So another study at the University of Rhode Island calculated the number of calories that were consumed and that between those different kinds of eating speeds, and the result was shocking. Like women who ate quickly consumed 646 calories in 9 minutes. Women who ate slowly consumed 579 calories in 29 minutes. It took almost 3 times as long to eat less calories. So 67 fewer calories in 20 more minutes. So if you can just slow yourself down, you'd be surprised how much less you would eat. Now, obviously, it's hard to slow down. And we do have, I mean, there's many times where people are pressed for time. I totally get that. But what you could do is, like I said before, you could put your utensil down between bite. You could set a minimum number of chews per bite, just until you get the sense of slowing yourself down. I'm not talking about counting your bites for like the rest of your existence, but just until you get the swing of of taking a little longer, or taking smaller servings of things at first, even if you think to yourself, yeah, I would much rather have twice as much of that. Just let yourself go back for more if it's appropriate, if you're still not full. Um, Also set aside 20, 30 minutes to eat a meal if you can. Don't walk around the kitchen when you're bouncing your plate. Um, and they were fast. Oh my God. They didn't just walk around, but they were also really fast. Probably because, I mean, otherwise stuff will fall off your plate. I don't know for sure. You can also find an accountability person that you can pace your eating with. If your partner's also interested in not eating as much, then both of you can just go, okay, or trade forks or trade plates, make it fun, or like play musical chairs for a while and just get more conscious about how you normally do things. It's really about breaking that habitual, I do it this way, I pour in this much, I stuff myself with it, and then walk away, or I always eat it like this, so I'm going to eat it like that every day. People do that all the time. Eating with your family also typically does slow your meal, especially if there's like a lively conversation going. You just can't talk and eat at the same time. I mean, some people do try, but it will actually help. So, other thing, if you can, try not to eat in front of the computer or while you're looking through your emails or watching television or taking phone calls. If your brain is occupied by another task, eating becomes more mindless. And then again, you're susceptible to missing hunger cues, and then you overeat. So if you eat with distractions, see if you can look back and ask yourself, did I enjoy that? Or how much did I actually eat? And am I getting full? And do I feel nourished? The answers sometimes might surprise you, right? So, and if those questions are hard to answer, it's a clear indication you're not really paying attention to what's on your plate. And in turn, you're kind of over consuming your food and probably not experiencing the true benefits that you can have. So, one other mindfulness technique is learning how to cultivate your senses. So a lot of us will stop at the taste and maybe the smell, but if you really pay attention to the individual tastes of food that you eat, really sit down and taste it. Is there sweet? Is there sour? Is there bitter or salty or savory? And this is a little bit easier too when you're experimenting with new things. And if it's something you didn't make, can you tell what the seasonings are on it? Do you like it? Are there aspects of it you like? Are there aspects of it that you don't? This is really helpful also in a restaurant meal, just to really sit with it. The smell of food is really closely related to the taste. So notice your smell. Like, does it smell fresh? Does it remind you of anything else? And really take a look at shape and color and size. It's a suggestion always to eat as many colors as you can. Do you think the presentation of it is appealing? We try in our household to make nice looking plates because it's more appetizing. And, then people do less with more or more with less, I mean to say. Um, Pay attention to the texture of foods as you're eating it. Really like the differences in texture. I mean, we have a tendency to obliterate texture in our culture. So we mash everything. We do things to it that make it kind of this more sloshy texture or overcooked. Really pay attention to that though. And it may also prevent you from eating as much of it if you realize you don't actually like that texture. And, listen to how it sounds when you're eating it. It's kind of a weird thing, but when you're learning to cultivate mindfulness and slowing things down, it's really a couple of different senses that you can rely on. Now, after dinner, lots of people try and snack. It turns out that there is a decline in the activation of neurological reward pathways. So, this is the mechanism that allows food to satisfy us or hit the spot. So, it's an active investigation at this moment. Nobody really knows exactly why it's happening, but the advice generally is to stay busy. Make an after dinner plan, meet up with a friend. Potentially, I guess you could watch TV if you had the snacks put away, begin a new book, try and make something enjoyable, fill the time after the meal. Because most people do have this kind of snacking tendency if they're sitting still at night. So just shake it up and stop sitting still at night. Then you'll be less likely to be digging in the pantry. Also, what you can do is push your plate away from you or even put it all away completely. Just tell your brain you're done, and there's no reason to keep eating. Sometimes people will keep their dinners out in the evening and just kind of continue to graze on it. And ideally, you want to just tidy that up, put it away, put the food out of easy reach, right? So that it takes more effort to get it. And that just changes your decision into an intentional one versus just mindlessly snacking on leftovers in front of you. It's the same concept for snacks. If you have candy in your office and you can see it, you're going to eat it. There's just, it's just a thing. So, but if you actually have to take a walk or you need to go into the trunk of your car to go and get it, a lot of people will choose not to. So, don't buy it if you shouldn't be eating it, if you can manage that. Now, there's also a couple of other traps. Order less, allow yourself seconds if needed, or serve yourself less and allow yourself seconds if you need it. Use a smaller plate and a taller glass. Play around with the color of your dishes and always put healthy, filling foods available in your fridge or in your snack location. So you can always cut up veggies and have them ready to go. If they're there and they're ready to go, you'll eat them. If they're there and they're not ready to go, and there's something else that seems faster, most of the time you'll go for the faster option. And then don't eat from packages. Take the package, put it in a little snack bowl, and once you're done your snack bowl, you're done your snack bowl. So those are some interesting tips to that. And again, just as an emphasis, make things aesthetically pleasing. Use your best dishes. We always change our dishes seasonally at my house. So we have like Easter dishes and Halloween dishes, and they're all kind of small, right? Like they're the smaller plates. And light a candle. We've went for years lighting candles at dinner. Used to be Beck's job to light the candle, and it just made the whole ritual of eating and taking the time to sit down and quietly eating your dinner by candlelight. It's and we always put music on. Those are some of the best dinners ever, and it just forces you to slow down a little bit, even if you only put a candle on for yourself. In a beautiful napkin. We always have cloth napkins. All my friends are terrified to come to my house because we only have cloth napkins. And everybody's terrified to like make a mess on the cloth napkin. But make this beautiful table that you can enjoy. We don't always make that beautiful, but we can, and it actually helps us. Now, this is like a no-brainer for most of you, I'm sure, but a lot of today's food supply really has poor nutrient value than it has historically. And there's lots of very carefully engineered chemicals in processed foods, and they literally have the goal of tricking your brains into thinking that you're hungry. They're designed for that. So most of the processed food you eat signals you're hungry after eating them versus satiated. And it's like there's this lack of essential nutrients. So you're consuming excess calories before your brain is even aware how much you've eaten. It's just patiently waiting to receive that protein, fiber, and vitamins you need to function properly, which doesn't come in that meal. Like it doesn't come in a processed meal very easily. So it's super easy to overeat those things. So when you eat, you want to construct it with nutrients in mind, putting proteins, high quality fibers, those will combat overeating. Your brain is receiving that message and it gets the feeling of fullness more accurately because the signaling that comes from when you eat that goes to your brain, not so much with some of the processed stuff. And where you can, if you're one of those people who shouldn't be skipping meals, like you shouldn't be skipping meals and you do it anyway, that can really actually lead to overeating. So sometimes a small amount when you're hungry is much better than trying to wait until it's too late and then you're so ravenous that you want to eat everything that you see. So again, having things available, cut up with you, because there aren't great drive-throughs, for fruits and vegetables at the end of the day. So if you deprive yourself through the day too much for your body type, your body will feel it needs more than it actually does because there's going to be this huge drop in blood sugar and a release of hunger hormones and a super strong urge to overeat. And like we talked about before, stress management is a really big deal. And there's a couple of things that can actually also improve stress that aren't just food management behaviors, but are like exercise management behaviors, like go for a nice walk, listen to your favorite music, go out on purpose and spend some time, walking the dog or walking with your partner, or consider practicing meditation. These things actually are extremely useful. And if you really decide that you want to do something about your overeating behaviors, get somebody who will call you on it. Like get your sister involved or get your partner involved, whoever is important to you and is with you enough times to kind of stop you or at least point it out for you so you can make a new choice. Share that information with them or eat together so that you guys can help re-regulate each other. It's really important to create different habits. So I guess at the end of the day, I want to have you ask yourself, given all those things that we talked about today, what things could you think about mixing up or shifting around or just taking more time and paying more attention to actually reduce overeating? Um, and if you have questions about whether or not, sometimes the nutrition doesn't match, we've talked about this many times before. The right foods balanced will make you feel that satiety much more clearly, even if you have poor satiety genes, which should not be a determining factor. Um, on all of it. It isn't a determining factor in all of it. A lot of it is behavioral. And so those are just some of the minor ideas that we can do. Oh, so I forgot. I don't know if all of you know this or not, but we're going to have an actual in-person gathering on April 23rd. That's a Saturday. That's 1 to 4. It's I'm calling it the gathering just because it's like the first time I get a chance to do this, but I really am so aware in this last couple of years of how many of you would just be like kindred spirits if you all got together in the same room. And how many times have I said, so many people are talking to me about the same subjects in this last couple of years, all over the map, all sorts of things, work, things, COVID things, nutrition things, family things. All of us have had enough isolation. And I did actually want to get everybody together in 2020. Just after the shutdown is when it was planned for. Well, it's planned for that summer, and obviously it didn't happen. So this particular Saturday, we're actually going to do a number of different beautiful heart experiences. So we're going to do eurythmy, which is an anthroposophic movement therapy. It's something that you don't have to, it's not athletic in any way, shape, or form. It's very energetic. And so we're going to use some eurythmy exercises in a group. We're going to do some sacred space of the heart meditation. We're going to talk about polyvagal theory and stress. So there's a huge amount of information that's coming out about this right now, about what stress does for us and how traumatizing certain kinds of stress actually is. And then we're going to talk about de-traumatization techniques. So we spend that 3 hours kind of relaxing, getting in contact with ourselves, and then picking up some new skills about how to handle things. So I'm hoping that I'll see lots of you there. If you are not going to be able to do that, of course, we have 2 more free webinars. We have Produce Storage 101 in April, and we have Managing Your Asthma in May, just as spring allergy season comes along. So as usual, heartfelt appreciation for the best peeps on the planet. I always appreciate so much how many of you show up to learn every month and how many people watch the videos after, ask me for the videos after. It's really great. So don't forget to go to Whole Life Medicine to sign up. And obviously, I do want to hear about what topics you're interested in. So make sure to email me with ideas. Now, does anybody have questions, thoughts? Or are you just chomping at the bit, no pun intended, to go and practice some new food habits? Hoping I gave you lots of different options to try that out. Okay, nobody has burning questions. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Hope to see you at the end of the month at the Align event. But if I don't, I'll see you next month. Big hugs to all of you.
Thanks for watching. I love to connect to my patient community to inform and inspire, and I hope you'll join us again in the near future. Don't forget to check out whole-life-medicine.com for more webinars and events.